Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming back. Thank you for all the support through this podcast. I have a great team, family, and friends who have been so supportive, and it means a lot. So thank you so much for supporting us. I'm so excited about this podcast today. By this time this podcast airs, it will be May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And our mental health is so important, especially right now, as the coronavirus pandemic has made a huge impact on it. Whether we're directly affected or indirectly affected, we're all affected somehow. And so I am so excited today to talk to my colleague, Jacqueline Carmona, who is our counselor here at the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Tarrant County. We have worked together for about 3 years now. We have done some awesome work together, which I'm really proud of. And I've learned a lot from her about counseling, how to handle tough situations, self-care, Bitmojis, and so much more. And I'm so thrilled to have her on the podcast today. So here she is, Miss Jacqueline Carmona. Hi, Jacqueline.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you. Are you doing all right?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I was really excited about today. I woke up and I was just like, yes. And I just been thinking about it all day because I think this is just, we both went to school for counseling and we both are LPCs now. And I think this is just such a great opportunity to talk about this and how it's impacting our world right now.
For sure.
Yeah. Where are you talking from?
So I'm talking from a spare bedroom in our house that I turned into a temporary office. I even brought some of the stuff from my office to kind of make it feel a little bit more familiar and less spare roomy.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about how your life has changed, because everybody's life's changed temporarily for now due to the pandemic. So what's different about your life?
Well, work has definitely looked a little bit different. We're putting formal counseling on pause, so that's something that I really miss, seeing the members and their families face to face. As far as personal changes, I'm an introvert, like 100%, so it hasn't been too tough yet. And I've always kept like to-do lists, so I know how to keep myself busy, but we're social beings, and even introverts can't stay isolated and away from people, 100% of the time. So I learned pretty quickly that I had to utilize virtual technology to kind of see friends and family, and that's helped a lot. Another thing is I have really high energy dogs, so in order for them not to like jump in or bark a lot throughout the day, I have to carve out a lot of time to take them on walks or do like training with them to kind of wear them out. But the good part is I get to spend a lot of time outdoors and bond with them, so I don't get cabin fever.
Yeah, and I bet your dogs love it that you're home a lot right now. So do you have any list of things that that you want to accomplish while we have this time where we're spending a little bit more time at home?
Well, I've always kept like to-do lists. It helps me stay organized, but I'm going to be moving into another house soon, so that has taken up a good chunk of my spare time.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. So before we talk about mental health, I want us to get to know you and like how you became a counselor. Like, what was your journey like?
Well, I know we all kind of got in this to help other people. For me, it was quite personal at first. I grew up seeing someone struggle with depression, and it was difficult and pretty confusing because I'm half Hispanic and I grew up with the Hispanic side of my family, and they don't talk about mental health. Like, it's not necessarily taboo, it's just not talked about. So kind of in my teenage mind, I wanted to fix that issue. So I pursued a degree in psychology. Didn't quite know what I wanted to do with it. So after undergrad, I got this awesome case management job working with victims and survivors of Hurricane Ike. And I had a really supportive team of people who had a passion for helping. I got to hear a lot of really interesting and really hard stories of struggle, and being a part of people's recovery was so amazing. So I decided to go to grad school for counseling, and still quite didn't know what I wanted to work with, but then I got my first internship at a juvenile detention center, and seeing the resilience, the strength, and determination of every single kid, no matter what situation led them there or when they were facing like really hard time in jail or detention, that's when I realized I really wanted to work with youth.
That's awesome. And whenever you talked about the resilience, about the youth that you worked with at the juvenile detention center, it's crazy how sometimes life can do that to us whenever obstacles or challenges come our way, that it can build a resilience. And I think that should, like right now, with what's happening right now, that should actually, I think, give us some hope, because hopefully that's what we are building right now is our resilience through this tough time.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite part about being a counselor?
Well, I really liked hearing what you and Laura had to say last week, that it's a really big privilege to have someone to trust you enough to share their story and to be able to facilitate that safe space is a really big part of reducing stigma of mental
Mm-hmm.
health.
Yeah.
But I feel like my favorite part is when a client is putting in a lot of work and they finally express feeling proud of themselves for being able to do all that progress and owning all that work that they did, instead of kind of like saying, oh, it was the counselor who really helped me, when really it was them who allowed themselves to do that. So yeah, it's my favorite part.
Awesome. Yeah, that is really awesome whenever you see someone like gain that insight and like the light bulb clicks. And
Yeah.
that's just an awesome feeling. And to be a part of that is awesome. I agree with you. That's a good example. Right now we're living in a pandemic. And this is the first pandemic I've ever lived in. I'm not sure about you, but it's first for me. And and so we want to talk about how this is affecting our mental health. And so I want to ask you a similar question that I asked Heather in our first one, which was, what are some ways that you think people may be struggling right now with the news, social distancing, and our stay-at-home orders? And what are some potential behaviors as a result of what is going
Well, yeah, I'm reading and hearing a lot from, people I don't know and people that I do know, that like one of the big ones and ones that I kind of struggled with at first was huge changes and difficulties with sleep.
on?
Some other things like worrying about the uncertainty of what's going on, all the changes that happen so suddenly. Some people, because they're confused or they're angry, they lash out, they're unable to concentrate, maybe their eating habits have kind of changed up, they're engaging in certain things that help them avoid what's going on right now, like just kind of binge watching TV or spending too much time on social media or maybe completely isolating. I know I've been in leggings and PJs a lot, but some people are kind of doing that every day or maybe even neglecting some basic self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And in children, something I read recently was that it can cause a regression into old behaviors. So, maybe they're 10, but they throw tantrums like when they were 5, or maybe they're bedwetting, they're kind of sucking their thumb again. Maybe they're really, really hyperactive, being more clingy or crying, out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and those are all great examples. And I think right now, I would say that we're in uncharted territory where we are experiencing more stress right now than we are used to. And so, in another scenario, I thought a little bit more about is how families are spending more time together than they have ever before. It is a good thing because they can grow closer with one another. They do get to spend that time that they may have not had. But then there's another thing that I never really thought that I learned more about from talking to some families is how it can bring more stress because you are with them every day, every hour now. You're now their homeschool teacher, and so it adds a little bit more stress that you're not used to. And that's something like, and you talked about being an introvert, and I've heard people talk about that's a struggle, is just not having time to yourself. And I think something that's been really unfortunate that we've been learning for the past couple of months is that we've seen domestic and child abuse reportings have increased during this time. And I want to make one thing clear. I'm not saying that the pandemic is to blame for people's behaviors, and that they're absolved from their personal responsibility, because I think people should know better not to harm children or their spouses or family members. Um, but the thing is that we are in an abnormal position. Like and so there's more opportunities to see these kind of cases increase. Something that was reported was Cook Children's Medical Center, which is a big children's hospital here in Fort Worth, saw an increase in cases of severe child abuse in March. Another organization, CASA of Tarrant County, talks about how with the increased cases of abuse, they feel like they're going to need more volunteers as the pandemic increases. And for those of you that don't know who CASA of Tarrant County is, they're court-appointed special advocates. So they're special advocates for people to speak up for youth who have been abused or that need somebody to speak up for them. And it's volunteers that actually speak up for those youth, and they get trained to do that, which is a great service. And last thing I want to say is how we talked about domestic abuse and how about a month ago, Safe Haven of Tarrant County mentioned how they weren't able to accept new domestic violence victims because the shelters were full. And they were saying this at least until April 3rd. So I don't know if anything has changed since then, but it really shows, like when we see these news, how we're right now in a position where we're trying to flatten the curve for our hospital so that the virus doesn't spread. But at the same time, it seems like we're needing more resources in our state for people who need it, because I think that's just unfortunate that if people are like say the domestic abuse are getting abused and they don't have anywhere to go because the shelters, because Safe Haven is full. And Safe Haven did make it clear to definitely still contact them, and they'll do whatever they can to help in the situation, even if they are full.
Yeah, it's a really tough thing to see. And, most of us weren't taught how to cope with the pandemic, and sometimes, not knowing how to cope at all. And with so many changes in such a short amount of time, it can bring a lot of issues to the surface. And it's really tough to hear.
Yeah, definitely. Even before the pandemic hit us, life was already hard. There are people who are already struggling with anxiety, depression, addiction. And how do you think this can affect people who are struggling before the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's really tough because a lot of the issues that I mentioned, we're kind of seeing as far as behaviors or things that we're struggling with are potential symptoms of mental health issues, and the pandemic can make those things worse. For example, with depression, grief, and anxiety, we usually try and help clients in reducing certain behaviors or thought processes, such as like, getting out there, getting out of the house, being more active, focusing on positive and reassuring things. However, we're being told to do the opposite. We have to stay home. And the reality of uncertainty and loneliness during this time is not an irrational thought. I even read an article this morning about how in the UK, 80% of people 25 years and younger reported that the pandemic had made their conditions worse, and about a fourth of them weren't able to access mental health supports.
Oh, man.
Fortunately for us, in the US, I know that the states have been taking a lot of steps during this time to make resources more accessible, like through virtual care, but there may still be difficulties for some people to be able to access those. For example, if there's a single parent who has a lot of children, they're trying to kind of help them with their schoolwork and then work from home, or maybe they don't have access to the technology needed for mental health care, it can make it really difficult to get some of the resources out there.
Wow, that's a high statistic of 80% of people 25 years old 25 years old and younger in the UK reporting that their conditions got worse. But I mean, it's not surprising. It makes a lot of sense given the conditions. I mean, even before all this hit, I mean, I felt like it's already been, life is already hard enough. And to be dealing with anxiety, depression, and other disorders before any of this happened, I mean, I definitely can see how it adds to it. And I think, and I don't know about you, but like when I was going through my graduate classes, they never really prepared us. I don't feel like we got prepared for this. Like, I don't think anybody's really experienced this. So I feel like it's a new territory for us mental health professionals. And the thing is that we're still learning new information on COVID-19, the virus itself, the CDC recommendations, the effects of certain businesses shutting down, and how all these factors are affecting one's mental health. And I think that we'll get a better understanding of the short-term and long-term effects on our mental health once the time has passed and research has been done, which could be about 5 to 10 years from now. But I agree with you that I think that the fact that we do have virtual options for mental health here in the US is really great. It's great that technology has been able to do that for us to where we still can seek assistance. I know I saw my counselor last month still and still been able to do that. And I think something that also encouraging was the CARES Act that recently got passed includes a $425 million appropriation to Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to address mental health needs. And so hopefully that's something that they see, that they anticipate happening, so that people can get the help after this, because everyone's going to be affected differently from it.
Yeah.
Kind of like I said earlier, we're all directly impacted by this virus in some way. And right now we're asked to social distance, shelter in place, wash our hands, and not touch anyone as a way to slow the spread of COVID-19 and flatten the curve. But like just the guidelines in themselves, how can these recommendations affect our mental health?
Well, I'm a neuroscience nerd, so I always like talking about the things that I'm about to like mention. But in terms of the social distancing, there's this hormone called oxytocin, which is released in our brain when we're bonding through physical positive touch, such as hugging, even like shaking hands. And that hormone has been linked to a greater sense of happiness, trust, and empathy, and it lowers our physical and emotional distress levels. So our lack of physical closeness from social and physical distancing can reduce that production of oxytocin and can be one of the many factors in our stress levels during this time.
The CDC guidelines have affected our way of life, and for some of us who we are. I'm not really a touchy person, but I know some people who are. Like that's one of their love languages is physical touch. That's how they greet people. That's how they show people love. That's how they feel connected. And so for them to be told not to like touch anybody right now, it feels like they're changing who they are, and that's what I've heard from some people who do fall in that category. And so like when I've gone back to work, like work interactions have been weird. And it's been weird to have to distance ourselves because it just feels unnatural. And so when we have these guidelines in places, it also causes us not only those kind of things changing who we are, it also causes us to miss out on events like this month, like last month, I missed out on one of my best friend's birthdays. Families like can't visit their family members in the hospital. And so that's really hard to say, like you can't say goodbye to your family member if something was to happen, or like just to be with them while they're going through something. And the fact that we have these guidelines that kind of prevents us from doing that. We're wearing masks at stores to prevent spread, and it just looks like almost like a weird movie that we're in right now. So I think we can have understanding and we can agree to the recommendations, but it still has an effect on our health in some way.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I've talked to people and I told them it's okay to be scared right now because there is a lot going on, and fear and anxiety may be appropriate responses during this time. The problem we are seeing is how people are reacting out of fear, which is not always the best thing. So if you can talk to us about the potential positive and negative effects about our fear during this time.
Yeah, so our fears, uncertainty, and anxiety that we're experiencing is valid right now. Pandemics are traumatic, and the health risks that are out there are very real. To a certain extent, anxiety can be a good thing. It's a natural process that helps us to survive. When we were living as hunter-gatherers, the alert state like that, caused by anxiety allows us to avoid and escape dangerous situations. But now that most of us don't have to worry about being a tiger's meal, unless you're Carol Baskin's husband, too soon, no, I'm kidding. I'm not, we don't have to worry about those things, but anxiety and fear can have negative effects on our health and our decision making. When it comes to decision making, fear affects us a couple of different ways. So the brain's really complex, but to kind of simplify it, and a lot of people are kind of using this example, but it's called a hand model of the brain. So if my hand was the brain, this part's the front. This would be our prefrontal cortex. It is responsible for a lot of things, but some of its responsibilities are our sense of reasoning and self-control. And then underneath it, right here, is the amygdala, which are responsible for a lot of things like emotions and impulses. When we're scared and anxious, our amygdala takes over and disrupts the prefrontal cortex. Some people call it like flipping your lid. You feel like you're flip out, but it's like your prefrontal cortex almost metaphorically, gets flipped and this part takes over. So when the amygdala takes over, we're more likely to make fear-based and impulsive decisions, decisions that don't take into consideration like facts or careful consideration. Hence the toilet paper shortage of 2020, or wearing gloves but still cross-contaminating things in the supermarkets, discrimination acts towards Asian populations, or it can do the opposite and lead us to kind of freeze up and not make any decisions at all. And that can make us feel more helpless in the long run. But no matter what the action or consequence of anxiety, it takes up a lot of energy to be so every day. And when we operate in that headspace for a long time, we might not be able to concentrate, or we feel really tired. And that could make it harder to actually try and get accurate or positive information or interactions, and lead us to this vicious cycle of irrational and fear-based decision making.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that, and I was so excited when I heard that you were going to share the hand model of the brain, because I mean, it's so, I think what's so interesting about like the amygdala is it is it is the thing that is our fear. It is the thing that is kind of the thing that protects us. But it's a small part of our brain, and it can have so much power over the decisions that we make. And the prefrontal cortex is the thing that's really the driver, and it's the one that really helps us to be able to regulate our emotions and be able to handle things in the best possible way. And so I think that's something that's really important, is we want to be able to use the biggest parts of our brains to be able to kind of drive us in the decisions that we make. Another thing that I'm glad that you mentioned was how anxiety, fear, and concerns are valid right now. I think it's important that we normalize people's feelings during this time, because I think when we share these things, then it shows how we're not alone, that we're not the only ones feeling this, that other people can see where we're coming from as well. And there's a good chance people do, when we do talk about these things. I'm not classified as a high risk for severe illness from COVID-19. Just like my age, my physical health, and those kind of things kind of just makes me at a lower risk. When you talked about fear being a good thing, my fear is that about potentially spreading it to others. Because there's people who are asymptomatic, and you can end up spreading it to other people, and that could be higher risk. And so I think that to think of fear in that way and to use that as a justification to social distance right now, I think is a really positive thing, because we're really showing ourselves to think about others. And another thing that you said, I think that's really important, is that this is a traumatic event. I would say that all of us are going through some type of trauma right now, because we're all experiencing this. And the effects of the trauma are going to vary with each person. And so something we should be aware of, just right now and also afterwards.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, natural disasters, which pandemic is a natural disaster, it's a type of trauma, and trauma involves situations that are in some way unexpected. They cause a sense of helplessness and are out of our control, and they're either a perceived or a real threat to a person's safety, and we're experiencing all of those. So I mean, it doesn't mean that we're going to experience PTSD and don't panic even further, but like you said, it's just important to be aware of our experience.
Right. Yeah. And so during this time, what are ways we can better take care of our mental health?
So fortunately, there's a lot of resources out there for this and in general. But to kind of circle back to earlier, a fun fact is that oxytocin can be produced in a lot of different ways while we're sheltering in place. So some things you can try and set aside time each day to do is if you have pets like me, spend time petting them, going for walks with them, or teaching them new tricks that elicits oxytocin. Engaging in eye contact, so FaceTiming, Zoom meetings, or just kind of sitting down and having kind of eye conversations where you're keeping eye contact. So, put your phone and iPad away for a little bit. Mirroring activities, so anything that's physical, like exercise or playing Simon Says, where you're doing the same movements as people, that can also produce oxytocin. If you don't live with other people, it's been shown to be just as effective as if you do it online. Any kind of any kind of quality time together, whether it be just listening to music, cooking, playing games, watching a funny movie, anything that you can do together versus doing it alone. And then safe and positive touches, like
Hmm.
you have a child at home, maybe rocking them, brushing each other's hair, and hugs are really important. Apparently, research says that like 8 hugs a day are like really key to
Hmm.
producing optimal oxytocin. But if you're a person like you and I who aren't very touchy feely, you might have to get kind of creative. For kids, you can do like the hand clapping games like Miss Mary Mac or Patty Cake, stuff like that. And a really cool way to reframe social distancing is that it should be just physical distancing, not completely socially isolating yourself. So it's a good way, I think, to kind of look at it. In terms of things that don't have to do with oxytocin, some things that might help us feel more in control and a sense of normalcy are things that we would normally, or if we're not normally doing it, kind of start doing it, like making the bed every day, getting dressed up and not in pajamas, even if you're staying inside, setting daily goals, and trying to work that into a routine, but also reminding yourself that if you can't stick to a routine because you got barking dogs or you got children or things at work change, kind of give yourself some grace and forgiveness and self-compassion to allow yourself that break and not being able to stick to your routine. And then lastly, if you're still struggling, or even if you're not, just kind of seeking out some kind of support or even professional help.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad that you mentioned like having grace and mercy on ourselves, like to be able to be ourselves through this time as well. Because I think it's real. I think it could be really easy to be hard on ourselves that we didn't get certain things accomplished, like we may not have an opportunity like this again, and so I think that that's really important to be able to be kind, not only to others, but also ourselves as well. Something that I've read is how research has been linking social isolation and loneliness to both poor mental health and physical health. And so it shows how connection is very important. And I think that you mentioned something really important that said we're not saying, we might be saying physical distancing right now, but we're not saying to not socially distance ourselves right now. And so this is a book I really want to read. It's by the Surgeon General, the former Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Vivek Murthy. It's called Togetherness. So being in the medical field, he talked about like how loneliness is actually one of the biggest public health concerns right now because he talks about how loneliness is our innate desire to connect and how that's something that we as humans need. We need to have that connection. And so I read this on a LinkedIn page, and he talks about tips on how we can create connected lives with people. And so here's some of the questions that we can ask ourselves to help us with that, which is: do we choose to make time for people? Do we choose? I'm sorry. Do we show up as our true selves? Do we seek out others with kindness? Do we recognize the power of service to bring us together? And it ends by saying, as we build connected lives, we make it possible to build a connected world. And I think that is just so important right now. And so I truly believe like that it is our job to check, take care, and serve one another during this time. And I think the thing is that you don't have to be a counselor or an expert or have all the right answers to be able to help somebody. I think that this has taught us that we need one another during this time. And it's up to us to be able to connect and check in with one another, to help each other during this time. And so, what are some ways that we can help others?
I mean, everything you said, I think, is wonderful. I'm pretty spot on. Empathy, connection, it's really important during this time. Helping others has been shown to improve that sense of connection. And so I think when in doubt, one of the best ways to help and show empathy is just being there to listen and be present, maybe not in person, but, virtually as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And something I kind of want to elaborate a little bit more on, the questions that he said to ask. So Dr. Murthy recommends like for 15 minutes a day to spend time each day reaching out to people in our lives. And I think that that's I think that's something that can be very simple. It could be a text message. It can be calling, and it's possible you may not be able to reach them, but at least making that effort to be able to show that show that you care about someone and that you want to hear from them and that they're important. I think one of the and another thing he mentioned was one of the greatest gifts that we can give to other people is the gift of our full attention. I think that's something that's really powerful, is just sometimes people just need someone to listen to them, just to be there for them. They don't necessarily need you to fix their problems or like be their savior in any way. To give somebody that attention, to feel that special is something really, I think that's a really great gift we can give to people. And I think something about where he talks about service is that it shifts the focus from us to others. And while reaffirming that we have value to bring to this world, because I believe that we all do have value to bring to this world. And I think you'll agree with me on this, is that we chose our profession because there is a lot of joy that comes from helping and serving others. Kind of like what you talked about earlier about seeing lives change. There is a lot of joy that comes from that. And it's not necessarily anything we've done, it's to see like the process of them changing. And it's a big reason of why it is that we do what we do. Understandable, as mental health workers, we are called and asked to take on others' burdens during this time. And also it applies to anybody on the front lines right now, whether it's hospital workers, and other organizations that's kind of their calling, is to be service to other people. Also I think about parents as well. They're called to bear the burdens of their loved ones. And so that can be a whole lot to give, especially during this time when we may not know how we're handling it. What are ways we can help people, but at the same time not neglecting ourselves?
This is something I learned like pretty early on when in the social services world. Boundaries and mindfulness are key. I mean, I like that you and Laura talked a lot about this last week in regards to social media use, but in general, and when we help, I think we have to know our limits, our needs, and just continuously check in with ourselves. There's this quote by Benjamin Franklin where he says, "When the well has run dry, we know the worth of the water." I interpret that as like being mindful of where we are physically and emotionally is really important to ensure we don't unknowingly exhaust ourselves or empty that well, because once that well is dry, there's no more water to give. But some people kind of grow up learning that putting themselves first is selfish, but it's not. It's necessary. It's self-care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know for me, like, I'm still trying to figure this out. I think, like, something that people should know is that even as mental health workers or people on the front lines, we're struggling too. We're still trying to make sense, and we're still trying to figure out our best ways of coping as well. And I think that some days are better than others, and just like anybody else. And so I talked about how rewarding it is to give and help others. And I think something that's important is if we aren't taking care of ourselves, then when we do those kind of things, it can be draining. We can lose the joy that we once have. one of my favorite examples is like when you're in a plane and say the oxygen masks fall down. And what they recommend for you to do when that happens is they recommend for you to put the mask on first and then help the person next to you, because if you're helping that person, you may not be getting the oxygen that you need to be able to sufficiently help them, and you end up like not only not helping them by not putting yourselves in the best position. And I think that those of us who are on the front lines, I think that something we talked about earlier was trauma, and that we are going to be exposed to more trauma. And that's something that we have to kind of be understanding of that could be something that we may carry with us. And so that's why self-care is just so important during this time.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's just go say a week after the restrictions have been lifted and we're casually returning back to normal life. How do you think people are going to react?
Well, I imagine for me, I know that there might be some mixed emotions. Of course, like the first one is relief, like, yes, I can finally get out, but maybe some disbelief and hesitancy, like, is this really over?
Mm-hmm.
Just because there's been so many changes, and when people are in that state of anxiety for a long time, it takes time to readjust, whether or not it's good or bad changes. I know it's going to be hard for me to have to commute again, and my dogs will be very sad that they won't get as many cuddles when we reopen.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be like through whenever that does happen. I feel like the dogs are going to be the ones that are going to struggle the most because they're so used to having all this, having people around and having this attention they never had before. And then they're going to be kind of left alone again. And so, man, feel for those dogs. We talked about this a little bit, but I remember when 9/11 happened. And people were scared of flying on airplanes. People did not want to fly on airplanes. They were very empty. And so I think you saw that trend even after they implemented more security and they implemented more things, but people still were kind of hesitant to fly. But then as we saw throughout years and before all this happened, like it was like people are flying all the time, and maybe not everybody, but people did eventually start flying again. And I feel like this is the same thing. I think that this is going to be an adjustment for people as well. And I think it's okay for people to be cautious because, right now, it does feel like the world is unsafe and if we don't feel comfortable, then maybe we do need to be a little bit cautious jumping back into things. And I think also in general, I think that there's going to be precautions moving forward, like so that we do have better health to be able to do what we can to avoid something like this happening as well. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I think everybody's just going to be different with their reactions on how they handle it. And so to close out our time talking about this, something I really want to do in our podcast is talk about the positive things, because I feel like it's important to be able to talk about the issues and talk about the risks that are happening and how it's going to affect us, because it's so important to ourselves that we be able to understand those things so we know how we can best handle those things. I think that there's also so many positive things that are happening. And so what are some of the positive things that you've seen?
So I take 6-foot distance daily walks with my dog, and I've been seeing these really cool like hashtag statements or positive notes written on the pavement, and I'm really digging that. But I think just the general increase of people willing to help in some way, like seeing people set out tables of free supplies in their front yard, even like toilet paper, not used toilet paper, but new toilet paper. I think that's really awesome, just that everybody helping.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like these tragedies are amazing opportunities to encourage and support one another. And I saw something very similar when 9/11 happened. I thought that it was actually a moment where felt like where humanity really united and people really started caring for one another. And so I'm inspired by people right now who are on the front lines, people who are working in the hospitals, who are putting their own health at risk. It doesn't necessarily mean people just in the hospitals. It's also like grocery store employees, people in restaurants that are providing services. And I want to really give a shout out to our BGC team because they've been providing meals Monday through Friday each week, dinners for families to come pick up. And yesterday, I actually helped out with our food bank, which is we did a food bank, which is almost like giving out groceries to families. And when I was there, I saw so many people. I saw like all of us just, and I was just like, man, this is really hard work. This is hard labor, and you're just going just to be able to get as much to like get pretty much pack these bags so that all these families have food for their homes. And so, and you just see, and I just saw like so many people just of our team that was so selfless, that was just doing what they needed to do to be able to make all this happen. Some of them afterwards actually served dinner to families. So they did that in the morning and then did that. And I'm just like, man, that's a lot of work. That's putting in a whole lot of effort. And so I'm just really proud of the people in our organization for really doing that. It's just really I was so happy to be there for that. Yeah, it is. What we want to do, so we're going to do couple things we're going to teach what families can do at home. What we're going to do first is you're going to actually teach a breathing and mindfulness exercise.
Okay. Yeah, I chose something really brief and easy that combines a couple of different things. So on our Boys and Girls Club virtual programming podcast or videos, there was really good coping skills, and one of them mentioned breathing. I was going to kind of expand on that and add in a couple of different components. So okay. When we're breathing, it's really important to pay attention to how we're breathing. So I know you can't really see, but if you put your hand on top of your stomach and take a deep breath in, you should be able to feel your belly rise. If just your chest is rising, then you've got to imagine your belly filling up like a balloon. Because your belly isn't filling up with air. It's a part of your stomach that gets pushed down by your lungs to let you know that you're taking a full breath in. And that's important because with each breath in, you get more oxygen, and oxygen is really good at kind of calming down your brain, helping to turn back on your prefrontal cortex and kind of calm down your amygdala. So one, just paying attention to how you breathe and getting it to where your belly is rising. But something that I actually learned yesterday that was really cool and takes a little bit of visualization is if you want to kind of cross your arms and put them on your shoulders and take a deep breath in for 4 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as you breathe out, maybe squeeze your shoulders harder for 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason why I have you do that is because we're missing that physical touch and that sense of safety, and being able to kind of, whether it be patting yourself on the back or kind of giving yourself a shoulder massage, is kind of eliciting that oxytocin and making you feel kind of embraced, and it's supposed to increase our sense of safety. You can also, as you breathe in and feel your lungs and your stomach kind of rise, I thought it was really cool visualization to imagine that your breath is kind of, and the air is kind of giving you a little bit of an embrace, and it kind of gave you a nice feeling, nice safe feeling. So you can either, again, kind of squeeze your shoulders, you can put your hand on your belly, or imagine your breath kind of embracing you. And even if it takes a little bit to kind of get used to that, and I know it's kind of just really simple, focusing on your breath, but for a moment it can get you distracted from whatever stressors are going on in the home, and it's bringing your awareness back to your body, which is the one thing that you do have control over in this time. And so kind of regaining that sense of not only safety but control. So I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah, and I heard this once, like they talked about, like, if you can hold off for like 5 to 10 seconds, then that can make such a huge difference on your reaction than if you were to react within that time. And I think these are really good exercises to kind of help with that, like to help kind of teach us how to do that.
Yeah. And if you do them together, if you live with people at home, again, you're engaging in that mirroring, that eye contact. You're kind of incorporating so many different wonderful things that can make us feel safe and more calm.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a brief break and then we're going to transition into our activity. We are back. So, something I like to do in this podcast, I like to be able to teach activities that we can do at home. And so, what we are about to do is we're going to do a virtual scavenger hunt. So, both Jacqueline and I are at our homes, and so we can go. So, we're going to be finding items on this list that was given by one of our coworkers. And so, this is something that you guys can do at home with your friends as long as you have permission from your parents to be able to video chat or FaceTime them and everything. And this is something that you guys can do together to be able to kind of like show things and also get some exercise as well. So do you kind of get what we're about to do, Jacqueline? All right, awesome. So let's see what our first item is. So the first item is we're going to find something in our house that we love. All right, I got my thing.
I got my two things.
Oh, all right. Share who are those people? Who are those you have?
This is pollo, which is chicken in Spanish.
Oh.
And this is waffles. Yeah, not very. So chicken waffle.
Yep. So this is my hero. I shared with you guys, this is Dirk Nowitzki, and this is a bobblehead that I have. And this is like his career points and everything. So that's the thing that I love. I don't have any living things in my house, but I think that's awesome. Dogs getting more love.
Yes.
Yes. All right. The next thing, I want us to get an item that represents our favorite hobby.
Hobby. Okay. Okay. Me first, you.
I'll go first. So these are my running shoes. So that's something that I do a lot is I run, and so that's my favorite hobby is running.
Awesome. So this is a picture of me in a magazine, a local magazine back in one of the places that I used to live. I used to be in a band, and I love music. So
awesome. Cool. All right, next item is our go-to quarantine snack.
Oh gosh.
All right, I got mine. I could have told her about the next one. Oh well.
I had to let them out. They were getting riled up.
Okay. What do you have? You go first.
Ben & Jerry's dairy-free ice cream.
Oh my gosh. I was going to do another question that was going to be like our guilty, like our cheat meal. And that was going to be mine because I love Ben & Jerry's ice cream. I've got the milk and cookies right now and the Tonight Dough. Those things are awesome. Love them. Do you have Disney Plus, by the way?
Yes.
Have you seen The World According to Jeff Goldblum?
No, but I love Jeff Goldblum, so I'm gonna have to see that now.
Yeah. So they have this episode where where Ben & Jerry's is in it. It's about ice cream, and they talk about how they created ice cream. It's awesome. It's worth watching. So this is my go-to snack. These are mandarins. And so this is something that's really important.
Healthy now.
Well, this is the thing. This is a snack. Like if it wasn't a snack, then I would have chosen what you chose. But I feel like it's really important to take care of our health and immunity, and I feel like oranges are really good for that. So that's kind of what I do. I stock up and eat them as fast as I can before they go bad. Next, a book or movie that you're reading or watching right now.
I have mine next to me, so that's pretty easy.
right, got mine. What do you have?
Called Range. My dad sent it to me.
What's it about?
It's about how, like, if you take a broad interest in certain things, you are able to succeed better in your field or in, kind of if you're a Renaissance man versus like a specialized thing, how that can be
Hmm.
beneficial. It's really cool.
Awesome. So my thing, I actually have two books that I'm on right now. So one of them is on prayer, because that's something my small group at church is going through, and so it's a feel like a very good thing to do right now. And then the other one is this is the Moment of Lift by Melinda Gates, and it's really interesting, but it's like it's the chapters are so long, so it's been taking me a long time to get through it. But I'm getting there. So once I get there, once I finish that book, I really want to get the togetherness book that I was talking about earlier, and read that one because I think that one's going to be really fascinating. All right, so one more. Something you received as a gift. So something you've received as a gift.
Hmm. God, I do that. Ooh.
All right, what's yours?
So it's a San Antonio Spurs shirt.
Oh,
From San Antonio.
I'm
Oh
sorry
no.
to hear about that.
It's my hometown, so yeah.
All right, so I got this for my birthday. One of the students made it for me.
Oh,
And it says "Happy Birthday, Mr. Allen." And so it's got Groot because I love Groot, and it's got the Avengers in there as well. And so this is mine. So this is really awesome. So I thought about something else, but then I was like, oh, I got to show this thing because this artwork is great. I need to figure out how to hang things up. I don't know how to hang things up on my walls. I should learn that during this time.
to
All
do
right.
it.
So that was our scavenger hunt. So that's something that you can do with your families at home, and it's a lot of fun. And so, and it's a way we could stay connected together as well. All right. So before we go, I want to ask three questions I've asked every single one of my guests because I'm really interested in their answers. So first question: what is one thing you most miss during the isolation quarantine period?
Um, Getting to see live music, so
Hmm.
concerts. Mhm.
Yeah. Do you have a like concert that you want to go to that would be ideal once they're allowed to happen again?
Yeah, there was one that a friend and I were going to go to, and two actually, and they of course had to postpone it. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Sorry to hear about that, but hopefully one day
yeah.
we'll get to go again if the
Cool thing,
opportunity
yeah.
present
The cool
itself.
thing is they're putting stuff online, so I'll still get to see it live, but I miss being in person with it. So yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely new experience for that. I agree. What is one thing you have learned through this time?
Even though we're physically alone, even though we're physically alone, we're literally all in this together. You're not alone. A really cool metaphor I read was that, a lot of people are saying we're in the same boat, but we're all having different situations at home or with work. And so we're not necessarily in the same boat, but we're all weathering the same storm.
Hmm.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that makes this really unique is that we are all sharing this together. And I think that even say like for me, I live alone, but I don't feel like I'm really alone. I feel like I have family, I have friends I've been able to connect with and talk to. And so I think and just being able to talk about those experiences really kind of
Yeah.
show that. And last question. What is one thing you most look forward to when we are free again?
Spending time in person with people, but it's a close tie with shoe shopping.
Yeah. Man, and that's the thing is you can't try on the shoes. Like if in some places you might have to just do a buy and go. And
Yeah.
so that's just really hard. And so your shoe collection is going to have to stay pretty stagnant for a while.
Yeah.
Man, that's rough. That's a tough life there. So that is all for our podcast today. I want to say thank you to Jacqueline for agreeing to do this. I want to say that I have a lot of respect for you and I've learned so much from you. And so, is there anything you want to say to our audience before we go?
um, No, I mean, I miss everybody, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in person more often. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we do miss the kids, and we miss, just miss people.
yeah.
And yeah. And I think that's and something I want to close out with. I know that social distancing and sheltering in place, and even not hugging and like shaking people's hands is hard. But I just want you guys to know that you're not alone. That we're all experiencing this together. And something I really want to encourage you guys is to please check in with one another, because we are better together, and we need each other to make it through these times. And so stay safe, be kind to one another, and we will see you next week. Bye.